once more to the Invisible College. Now, today I've got something a bit different for you. It's going to be an interview, which I did a couple of days ago now, with a young man called Paul Smith. And what we were discussing was this book here, which I wrote. It's published in '98, but I was working on it from about 1995, and it's co-authored with Wilson and Baram Blackett, who were two researchers into the ancient history of Britain. They did a lot of other things as well, but they did a lot of research into the ancient history of Britain based on Wales and the records in Wales. Many people don't realise there's a whole load of stuff about the times before the Romans, when the Romans were here, the times of the Saxon invasions, all of that recorded in Welsh, along with a lot of other things like genealogies of the chieftains, the kings, the nobility. It was very important to them to keep the family trees going, because who you were determined very much what you could do. So there's a whole load of stuff, and a lot of this material is known about. It's in various libraries. There's a huge amount in the British Library in London, which I've actually looked at. There's also a large amount in Oxford, mainly in the Ashmolean Museum now. It used to be in Jesus College, which was the Welsh college in Oxford, and in Wales itself. So they'd researched an awful lot of stuff, and very controversial stuff. And they'd done a lot of research looking for where was King Arthur buried. The whole story about King Arthur. So that got me interested, and they contacted me actually, very unexpectedly. But I had heard a little bit about their work, so I was interested. I went to meet them, and we decided that we would do a book together, which I wrote, but it's based on their material. So I wrote it in such a way as it was an unfolding adventure, my adventure with them. We went round hundreds of different places, monuments, and see certain stones and churches and what have you. And particularly, I was mainly with Alan, but sometimes with Baram as well. And he would tell me anecdotes and stories, and I absorbed an awful lot by osmosis. And then I did a lot of fact-checking. I did a lot of research into ancient history of Rome and Britain in the Dark Age, well, before the Dark Ages, really, in the 4th and 5th centuries. And, eventually I wrote the book. Now, Alan and Baram are both dead now. They died, both of them, in 2023. Alan was 91 at the time, so he basically died of old age. Baram was only, I think he was 60 or 61, something like that. And he died in a house fire, very tragically. The place where they lived, they shared a house. A fire broke out, and it's the second time they'd had a fire there. They had one sort of a few years earlier when Baram had been very badly burnt. And this was now a second fire which destroyed, a lot of material, and he died, I suppose, probably from smoke inhalation or something like that. But anyway, I'm the last man standing. So Paul Smith, who's got a little channel, asked me if I would do an interview with him for his channel, talking about the Holy Kingdom. So I'm delighted to do that. And if other people want me to do talks with them, I'm very open and willing to do that, to discuss. And I've got a lot of different things I've researched myself. I've written 12 books, I think, and going into all sorts of subjects. But anyway, that's the gist of what we're going to talk about today, and I've done a recording of our interview, and I'm going to put this in the front of it, and you can watch the actual program. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy it. Bye-bye.
Well, hello everyone. As you can see, I'm with Mr. Adrian Gilbert,
Hi.
who's written some fantastic books that you can see behind me. And today I'm going to be interviewing Adrian on, where is
Here
it?
it is.
Aha! The Holy Kingdom.
Notice the title reads the right way.
Yes, I get that right sometimes on my channel. Sometimes, not always. Okay, so are you ready, Adrian? I've got a few questions for you
absolutely,
today.
yeah. Let's go for it.
Brilliant. Okay, so much of the source material for the Holy Kingdom comes from Welsh records,
Yeah.
collated by Cymric scholars like Iolo
Morganwg.
Morganwg, oh dear,
Yes.
I need to work on my Welsh pronunciations. Are you still of the opinion that these records are reliable? And if so, why are scholars like Edmund Williams so maligned by modern academics?
Right. That's something else to show you.
He's off already.
Something else to show you. These are the yellow manuscripts.
Oh wow, wow.
Here is the book itself.
Wow. Where did you find these, Adrian?
Alan Wilson had a friend, a librarian,
Yeah.
and he had bought another copy of this, and this one was falling apart. It's even worse now. So he was willing to sell it to me, and I bought it from him.
Wow.
I think what happened is, about that time, we're talking about the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, a lot of libraries were clearing out old books.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
nobody wants this rubbish, do
Oh
they?
dear.
So these things were turning up in jumble sales,
Charity
in
shops, yeah.
charity shops, second-hand
Yeah.
shops. Alan Wilson and Baram Blackett bought quite a number of books
Wow. That's
that
incredible.
way, and this guy did as well.
I mean, these
So-
books are priceless.
Well, you know, I paid 70 quid for it. I don't know what it'd be worth now. Probably 10. But anyway, what this has is it has the Welsh text. This is Ancient Saints of the Island of Britain, right?
Yeah.
So there'd be all in Welsh. Bran frendigay ab llediath e gyntaf o genel I Cymru o digwyd. Excuse my terrible. No, I haven't got the right glass. Oh, I have. Anyway, so that's all in Welsh,
Yep.
which is great. But when you go to the back, it's all translated into English.
well, that's-
So you got both versions there.
Yeah.
Um,
Brilliant.
and these genealogies and so on that he gives, the kings of Glamorgan, and he goes through all these different kings and so on. Now, I've since, you know, I got this and I thought, great. And I went to the British Library because Alan had a whole load of different links.
Yep.
He put in Arthurian Rex. Actually, I reproduced them into the Holy Kingdom. So you'll find those in the back of this.
Right.
Cottonian this and the famous Harleian 3859, which has the records of the marriage of Owen, son of Hywel Dda,
Yeah.
the wedding lists.
Yeah.
I checked up a lot of these manuscripts and I found duplicates of what was said in Iolo.
Wow.
Those are in the British Library.
Yeah.
So these people say, oh, he's a forger, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, they haven't actually researched the subject. And Alan Wilson one of his favourite sayings was, well, Adrian, they have the great advantage of
ignorance.
complete ignorance.
Yeah.
And it's true, they might have a degree in history from Oxford, modern history or something. That doesn't make them an expert on King Arthur. And let alone Welsh
History,
manuscripts to do
yeah.
with King Arthur. The Geoffrey Ashe of this world, I met Geoffrey Ashe. Nice man, but completely misguided. But you have to go into the Welsh texts, and many of them have been translated, and a lot were translated in the late 18th and 19th centuries by the Welsh Manuscript Society, who published this. So these people who knock them and say, well, they don't know what they're talking about, well, they haven't actually researched it. Now, what Alan did say is that there's a huge archive of Iolo's notebooks and so on in the Library of Wales at Aberystwyth.
Right.
And I think there might be some in Cardiff as well, but Aberystwyth is the main place.
Okay.
And people look through his notebooks, well, a complete fortune. Well, Alan said, you know, he was a bard. He was part of the bardic tradition. He was writing poetry too.
Right.
You know, so what they call forgery is actually him doing his bardic work.
Wow.
You know, I have no patience with these critics. Yes, there probably are mistakes. And when you go through these genealogies, you do find that at times there are different versions don't totally agree.
Yes.
There might be a gap in one and a few other names popped in another one.
Right.
So you've got Lecune and you've got different spellings very often. But you know who the guys are. And when you work with these manuscripts a lot, and at that time I was working with them a lot, you get very used to these names. Now if you look over there, behind you, you see those wallpaper things?
Yes.
Can you pull them over?
Yes, certainly.
Now, I went through these manuscripts. I wonder what this one is. There's nothing on that. That's just blank. These are all gone. There's the good stuff.
Ah, there's some writing.
Yeah. So I started researching and writing out genealogies. Now this one is about the Lords of Clare. That's not so interesting for you, but there's a lot of that in my later book.
But the Blood of Avalon? The Blood of Avalon.
Blood of Avalon.
Right, yeah.
What about them in there? So this one might be a bit more interesting.
Right. Oh yes.
Bellymower.
Bellymower. Kingwood.
The lineage of Bellymower, Lud, Tenofan,
Tolgoldumas,
Cymbeline, yeah.
Guiderius,
and
Arviragus
Arviragus is actually Belin. I've realised he's not Gwerid. Gwerid was this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he died in battle with the Romans.
And
his brother was Belin.
Some people say they were cousins.
Well, I think they're brothers.
Okay.
And he's the one who married Genoissa, Brisanna.
Which we're going to talk about later.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's just show you,
Wow, that's really
that
cool.
so you can see it.
Yeah.
That's one of the lists, and I've got lots of others here. But these are all saints here.
Is this the lives of the saints?
From that.
From that, yeah.
So I was doing my homework, you know. I wasn't just playing, and I wasn't just cribbing.
Yeah.
I did my homework, and I checked up on things as much as I could. And believe me, these texts do exist. So what happened is in the 19th century, and actually before that, in the 18th, there was a revolution in academia. It's partly to do with the Hanoverians who came over, and there was the Scottish rebellions in 1715 and 45, and that shook the monarchy. And they didn't want the same thing to happen to Wales. So they're already trying to eradicate the Welsh language. And come the 19th century, that was pushed even harder. And in 1845, I think it was, Bishop Stubbs, was it? I forget his name now. Anyway, he was the Regius Professor of History at Oxford. And he decided that all this history was rubbish.
He was Bishop Stubbs, yeah, I remember from the book now, yeah.
And he took all the history books and just dumped them in the bin and said, that's not to be taught in schools. That's rubbish. We're going on to the German model, which was...
scientific.
Yes, the Germans know what they're doing, you know. They're much more scientific and goes back. It's the Romans who are the ones who started everything. Britons before that were primitive savages, you know, painting themselves blue, and you know, building mounds and useless things like Stonehenge, bunch of rocks.
Which some people say the Romans destroyed Stonehenge.
Oh, quite possibly. Anyway, so that's what happened to British history. And then after that, everyone, you know, if you were Welsh and you wanted to go to university, there were no universities in Wales till about 1899 or something.
Okay.
You had to go to Oxford. And the Welsh college was Jesus College at Oxford.
Yep.
So that's how you have the Jesus College 20 manuscript, which also has a load of these genealogies,
Really?
particularly of the Brecon people going back to the sister of King Arthur and their father. So it goes down that Moyrig way, down that way. So Jesus College 20, you can find these on the internet now. They're there. Jesus College 20 manuscript. It's actually in the Bodleian Library now, I believe. The Harley and 3859, you know. Those are the two main ones that talk about the marriage of the Virgin Mary and all that. Oh, not the Virgin Mary, Anna, the cousin of the Virgin Mary. Now, anyway, I went to the British Library and I wanted to check all this out. And I actually got hold of the original Harley and 3859 manuscript.
Wow.
There's a little book like that.
How old is it?
About 1,000 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe a little older.
Yeah.
And it's written on vellum, which is animal skin.
Right, yeah.
And it stank to high heaven. I was going,
dear, yeah, I can imagine.
In a plastic bag, you take it, oh. And the writing, the monk who was writing, it's tiny writing. You can, you know, imagine he didn't have magnifying glasses.
Yeah.
He must have had really good eyesight to do that. You know. But paper was obviously so precious, they had to put as much in as they could. And I think the Bruticilio's in there and various other things. And then at the back there was these Harleian manuscripts. So I had a look at the actual originals. And there it was about the marriage of Anna with Arthurian.
Yeah.
And it was, I thought that was a colophon that had been written in the side of the text, from what Alan had told me, but it wasn't. It's actually in the actual text of the, so that must have been an accepted thing before that manuscript was manufactured, which would have been done at the time of Howell Dar, you know, for his son's wedding, you know. So it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know any of that at all.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
It's worth talking to me sometimes, you know.
Of course it is.
Excuse my funny look, people. I'm having my teeth done at the moment. I'm having an implant and I'm missing a front tooth, so I look like a pirate. But it's not going to be for very long.
Okay, so talking of the Romans, why do you think the British were so difficult to conquer?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. For Julius Caesar, they were difficult because they had a really good leader at that time, Caswallon, or Cassivellaunus, as he calls him, who was the high king of the. You know, they would elect someone to be the high king leader. They had lots of kings in different places. But in times of trouble, they'd elect someone to be like that. The Romans used to do the same, actually. In times of trouble, they would elect an imperator, an imperator who'd had total power for a year to do everything, because it was a time of danger in warfare. And that's how the emperor began. It was the imperator was the massive emperor.
Yeah.
So Augustus became an imperator, but he just continued it on and passed it on. So that's how Rome got its sort of quasi-royal, status again. So having got rid of their kings originally.
Yeah, we would have called Arthurian High King of Britain, wouldn't we?
Yes, I think so. Well, it'd have been Pendragon, actually.
Right, yeah.
That's what the title would have been, or certainly was a bit later. But it's that equivalent. And later on, you had people like Aethelstan, who was the Saxon king.
Alfred the Great's son?
Grandson? Son or grandson?
Grandson, I think.
He was Brett Wallader, leader of Britain, and took an army and defeated the Scots. He was trying to reunite the whole kingdom.
Yes,
under him.
that was Alfred's dream, wasn't it?
Anyway, cut a long story short, I had a good look at all those manuscripts, and so I did do my homework.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Adrian, are you still in agreement with your co-authors Wilson and Blackett that the Trojan War took place more recently than previously thought, and if so, can you give your reasons?
Yeah, I do believe that. There's another very good book called Centuries of Darkness, Peter James, and he makes a very, very good point. Actually, it was a bunch of authors working together. I got a copy upstairs, Alan gave me. But archaeologists, the chronology of the Near East was worked out by Flinders Petrie based on pottery in Egypt and the king lists of Egypt. And they decided that must therefore apply to the whole area. So they found similar pottery to what they had in Egypt. They said, well, that must be from that time. So this is all relying on the reliability of the Egyptian king lists, which are not reliable, manetho, because it's very clear now, to some people anyway, that some of these king lists are so shown as before and after when they should be in parallel, different parts of Egypt.
Right, okay.
Because periodically the northern part of Egypt and the southern part would be separate.
Yes.
So you'd have two dynasties ruling at the same time. But
Is that Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt? Yeah.
Yeah, north and south. Upper Egypt is actually south, because their map was upside down because the Nile flows downwards from there. So that's upper, going down to Lower Egypt. Anyway, so that put a spanner in the works. The archaeologists decided that there must have been a dark age in the Bronze Age. They call it the Bronze Age Dark Age, which can be as much as 700 years. And the funny thing is, and Peter James goes into this, that you have them going in, the Mycenaeans people going into before the Bronze Age Dark Age. Then there's a Dark Age. Then they come out into what we would call classical Greece. And they're still speaking the same language. They're still wearing the same kind of clothes. They're still wearing the same kind of hairstyles. Yeah. Recognisably Greek.
Yeah.
And yet there's been this big gap. You would have thought things would have changed during the interim, especially as there had been a gap, a dark age.
Yes.
So it's a total invention. So Alan, and I agree with him, would say that they've got the dating completely wrong for the Mycenaeans and people.
Yeah.
It's much more recent than that.
Yeah.
It's only a generation or two before the classical period you had that going on. So that's how you had Homer, talking about the Trojan War. It had maybe even happened in his lifetime, or maybe his father's, or very close. It wasn't something that happened 700 years previously.
Yeah.
So I agree with him on that. Absolutely.
Yeah. What about the? Has there been more than one Trojan War? Because some people will say that there was a Trojan War in this country, a Trojan Empire that took place, that was situated in Cambridgeshire on the Gog-Magog Hills.
Yes, I know. I've heard this. Well, you've got to remember that the Trojans, or the Britons, claim to have come from Troy.
So Brutus,
and they would apply names to places that, just like New York is named after our York.
Yes.
And you go to America and all sorts of places, Manchester, this, Birmingham,
Boston,
that, Boston, Texas, Boston, all of these place names that they hadn't got the imagination to work one out for themselves.
Sorry if anyone's watching from America.
Well, they probably came from those places, so they gave the name of where they come from, or they liked. So you can imagine that going on in Britain. But I do believe that, now I've told you about the Triangle Land, haven't I?
Yep.
And I showed you, Julius Caesar describes Britain as being shaped like a triangle. And if you look at Troad in Turkey, It's a peninsula on the northwest. And have a look on a map, and you'll see it is actually an equilateral triangle.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
With Dardania at the top. You've got, going down to the sea, and then you've got the Gulf of Edremit, I think it's called, Andromitium, is in there. And it's actually a triangle. So I believe the name Troad actually means triangle land.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
And I believe they called Britain the New Triangle Land.
Right, okay.
Troia Nuith.
Yes.
Or Trinovantum.
Okay.
London was called London, but it was also the capital of Trinovantum.
Yes.
Or Troyad.
New Troy.
New Troy.
Yeah.
Trinovantum, being the city of Troy, New Troy,
Yeah.
in the new land of Troy.
Yeah.
So, everything about the old Britons was to do with threes, wasn't it?
Yes,
They
of
love
course,
threes.
yeah.
3 this, 3 that, 3
That's
the other.
the magic druid number, isn't it?
Yeah. Arwen symbol, 3, shadows cast by the rock. So I believe that is the truth.
Okay. That's very plausible, if you ask me. It's a very interesting theory. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. So, in the chapter, The Romans in Britain, Adrian, you mentioned the fact that the most ancient roads in Britain are not Roman, but British.
Yeah.
Other authors such as John Michel and Marshall Abrahams have also written about this. I did have it with me. In The Great Migrations, Marshall Abrahams records that in a quarry near Telford, a stretch of paved road was discovered and dated to about 100 BC, while at Inkpen, between Exeter and Totnes, a stretch of paved road has been discovered which lies on the route of the Fosse Way. So, do you have any idea how long ago... Fossway, sorry, yeah. Do you have any idea how long ago the British started developing a system of roads, and why do academics refuse to give our ancestors any credit?
Because they're idiots. I mean, what we do know about the ancient Britons is that they used to like riding around in chariots.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Pulled by horses. Well, if you're going to ride around in chariots, you're going to need roads, aren't you? You might not mind bouncing around in a field when you're in a battle.
Yeah.
But mostly you're going to want
just going about your business, you want a road,
a road or some sort, maybe not a Roman road. And I don't suppose they're in straight lines, like the Roman ones. They're probably bending around here. And we know there are some, like the Icknield Way, that runs up from some Wiltshire, maybe even further back than that, all the way out to Norfolk.
Yeah. I seem to remember John Michel writing about this in a view over Atlantis.
Yeah.
I think he said that our old British roads were straight, but I may have got that wrong, so I read it a long time ago.
Well, he was into straight lines.
Well, yeah.
Straight lines. But I'm prepared to give away that point and say that, if I was building a road, I wouldn't want to be making cuttings everywhere and embankments. I'd work my way round the hills and follow the river valleys as much as I could.
Yeah.
And I think the Britons probably did that. They wouldn't have been up to the standard of the Romans. And there's certainly, if you read your Geoffrey of Monmouth,
which I have done, yeah.
Which you have done, there's one of the kings in there who's credited with...
Dinfus Maudi, is it?
I forget which one it was now. It wasn't that long after Brutus. But was it Duffin Well Murmured?
I think, yes. It's one of those, yeah.
Duffin
You're doing a much better job of it than I do.
Well, I'm missing a tooth, which makes it harder. But he's credited with creating a road system, and these were the king's roads, and this is where we have in our common law. It's actually still in force, the common law.
Yeah.
That you have right of way on the king's road, and you mustn't be harassed.
Yeah.
Sort of sanctuary of the highway. And Duffin Well Murmured is the guy who gave his name to Devon.
I didn't know that.
Devon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Dubonny tribe.
I know them, yeah.
That B can also be a V. Dovunny. The Dovunny tribe. Devon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
And the capital of the Dovunny tribe, I believe, was Corinium.
Right. Okay.
Named after Corin, the first Duke of Cornwall, so-called. Cornwall was that whole, it wasn't just what we call Cornwall, it was the whole southwest peninsula.
Right, okay.
Probably a bit more as well.
So would it have included Glastonbury?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
That, what people call Glastonbury, which isn't the real one, but that's another story, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that king, what was his name again?
I think it was Dyfnwal Milmud.
He's a very significant character
Yeah,
in
he's
that
very
history.
significant,
Very significant,
doing laws and highways and all sorts of stuff. Donald the Bald, it means.
Yes, that's right.
Man after my own heart.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Well, Adrian, in the chapter The Royal College of the Christians, you write that the early Christian church in Britain is known as the Chaldee, the Chaldean, and was founded by the apostles themselves.
Yes.
Can you tell us who the Chaldeans were and which apostles came to Britain, in your opinion?
Well, the original Chaldeans, the Chaldees, was in northern Mesopotamia, parts of what's now Turkey,
in Syria,
and that northern part of Syria and Syria, parts of Armenia. They were called Chaldeans or Chaldeans, and their city, Ur of the Chaldees, was not Ur down in Sumeria, as Leonard Woolley claimed. That was much earlier.
Yeah.
The Chaldeans, the two Chaldeans, Chaldees is Urfa. It was Uchai. Edessa.
Yes, I know, yeah.
And Edessa, which I've been to, and it's a wonderful place.
Yes.
Very, very interesting. There was a cave there which is where Abraham was supposedly born.
Right.
And the Arabs there, you talk to the people there, they say, well, this is where Abraham was born, and it's a very holy shrine, I went into it. I didn't feel brave enough to take a photograph, which is all the people praying in there. I thought, no, I better not.
yeah.
I might get stoned. But there's a cave there, and the thing about Edessa, or Urfa, is that it has a water supply that never runs dry.
Yeah.
And you imagine that, in a place like northern Mesopotamia, where there's a lot of desert around there.
That's been there for a very long time
It's probably there for, probably there at the same time as Göbekli Tepe, I would bet, which is just nearby.
Which is 9,000 BC, isn't it?
Yeah, I bet Urfa was just as old as that, not older.
Yeah. And of course, some people will say that Sanlurfa or Edessa was Jesus' hometown.
I don't believe that.
I didn't think you would.
No, that was Ralph Ellis, isn't it?
It is, yes. I've interviewed
I
Ralph
love
a few
it.
times.
I like him. He's a nice guy.
He's a nice guy.
I get on very well with
clever
him,
chap,
but I don't agree with his ideas.
Yeah, okay.
But that's, by the by, we each have our own freedom of speech.
Of course, yeah. Okay.
Right.
So, about the apostles coming to Britain, which particular apostles do you think came to Britain after the...
Well, the famous one, of course, is Joseph of Arimathea.
Yeah.
But also St. Barnabas.
Okay.
And
St. Paul?
St. Paul preached in London, so they say.
On Lud Hill, yeah.
On Lud Hill, yeah. And you can see his statue on a pillar there.
Yeah.
Where he supposedly preached to the Londoners.
Came past it on the train today.
Right, okay. And there was St. Philip probably came here. He's the great apostle of France. But he probably came here as well. But Barnabas and Ilid and the other one,
Some people have Simon Zealot's martyred in Lincoln.
Right.
I haven't looked into that one yet.
Okay, well, you know more about this than I do. There was the other guy who's in the Sanhedrin with Ilid.
Aristobulus.
He's another one who came here, Aristobulus. Anyway, so the principal one is Saint Ilid, who's Joseph of Arimathea, and Alan reckoned that the name Ilid comes from Gilead, and Gilead is an area on the east side of the Jordan River, up by Lake Tiberias, so Sea of Galilee. On the east side, it's now in Syria, I think. That's where there was a marker stone between Jacob Israel and his uncle from Haran, and they put up this marker. I won't go on your land, and you won't come on my land. We don't have any
Yeah.
you know, fighting between us because we're family. So that was the at Gilgal, I think.
Right.
There was a heap of stones there, and that marked the boundary. So it sounds like Saint Ilid might have come from Gilead.
Okay.
I don't know, but that was Alan's theory.
Interesting idea. Okay. Right, let's move on, Adrian. So
Yes, we better press on. But you only have to have an hour today, do you? Because
it's not my live stream. We
not
can
a
go
live
on for
stream,
as long as you like.
as
Yeah.
long as you want. Take your time.
I will do. Yeah. So, in the chapter "The Pirate Kingdom and Constantine's Succession,"
Yes.
you inform the reader that the 260 to 274, that from 260 to 274 AD, Britain, Gaul, Germany, and for a time Spain formed their own empire. I was completely unaware about that.
Yeah.
I've never learnt that before. Can you tell us how this short-lived empire was to have such a profound effect on the whole history of Western Europe and on the Holy Kingdom?
Yeah, it's called the Gallic Empire. If you study Roman history, you'll see it mentioned, but it's not talked about very much.
Okay.
And most people have this impression of the Roman Empire as this very strong military force that sort of just took over like the Soviet Union or something, and ran the place for 400 years, and then overnight almost sort of it was invaded by barbarians. Well, actually, it wasn't like that. It had its ups and downs, quite a lot. And there were periods when they had a strong emperor. You know, probably the peak of the Roman Empire was under Hadrian.
Okay.
Yeah, it was in 125 AD, something like
I don't
that.
want to digress too much, but I've been watching I Claudius for the first time recently.
Right,
yeah. So I've learnt that Augustus he looked a very good emperor.
Augustus was an excellent emperor.
And of course, Claudius himself was he was a historian, wasn't he?
Yes.
And came across as being a very good emperor as well. And sandwiched between those two, you had Caligula, oh my God, and Tiberius.
And you had Nero after Claudius.
And yeah, that's right, yeah. So very up and down.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, yeah.
And periodically, the families would run out of suitable heirs, and the Roman legions or the Praetorian Guard would sort of start putting people into roles, you know.
Yeah.
So basically, it was being run as a dictatorship.
I think I heard towards the end that people were literally cutting their children's fingers off and thumbs to mutilate them so they wouldn't be pulled into the army towards the end of the empire. It was getting that bad. They were, running out of soldiers. And
yeah, well, the trouble is what happened later on. We'll cover this bit first. You had situations when you had a weak central government, and then the provinces, there was always provincial guys who were running a province. They decided, well, I'd much rather run it for myself and us than pay taxes to Rome. So they would hive off bits. And this Gallic Empire grew up at a time when the Romans were being hard pressed in Africa and also in the east at Palmyra.
Yeah.
You heard of
Palmyra, yeah.
Zenobia, Queen of Palmyra.
That's right, yeah, in the 4th century, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And their attention was being fixed over there. So these guys in the West were able to establish their own little empire with France and Spain and Germany and probably Britain as well, forming this bloc, which was being governed from Trier.
Right, okay, yeah.
Trier is another Troy, by the way.
And it's a very interesting place,
Yes.
yeah. I did a little bit of research on the pagan god Isis.
Right.
Do you know about the pagan god Isis?
No, I don't.
Yeah, there was a pagan god called Isis. He was one of 3 gods in this country. Tyrannus was another one, and Trigeranos, I might be getting that wrong. Anyway, he was one of 3 gods, and the people in Britain and Gaul were worshipping Isis in the 1st century, which I find very interesting. Why was I telling you that, Adrian?
About Trier.
Trier, yes. So there's 2 statues of Isis, and one was discovered in Trier.
Right.
Yeah, Trier is a very interesting place.
You know, it's St. Helen.
Yeah, she lived there.
And she gave the robe to.
That's right.
Still there apparently. Supposedly the robe of Jesus.
Well, I did wonder about that because, of course, we've got the Turin shroud, but we've actually got a garment from Jesus, and
That
it's supposed to
supposedly
be at Tria.
The story goes, and you can see it in the New Testament, that the guards cast lots for his robe. They didn't want to cut it up because it's a nice single piece of garment,
Yeah,
beautifully made.
yeah,
So it seems that somehow that survived,
and it's still there.
and it came into the hands of the Empress Helen,
Right.
and she donated it to Trier.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose a cathedral or whatever was there.
Yeah.
And apparently it's still there. I haven't seen it myself.
No,
but
I'll have to look
might
that
be
up.
interesting to go there and have a look.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can't see that it's on display. Surely not.
I don't know.
No, I'll have to
I
look
don't
it
know.
up. But I read that. Probably I read it in there, didn't I?
The Crown of
And,
Thorns is supposed to
yeah.
be in Notre Dame in Paris. What's left of it?
I didn't know that.
Oh,
I
yeah,
didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's all the thorns have been broken off. People have taken them as souvenirs over the centuries. So you just have the bare wood twisted up.
Yeah.
Supposedly is the Crown of Thorns, but who
Well,
knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? Okay. Brilliant. Right. Okay. Well, just last question on that.
Yeah.
How did the empire, that temporary empire,
Yeah.
how did it finish? Because it didn't last very long.
No.
260 to 274.
Yeah. There were 4 emperors of that, and eventually a guy called Aurelian, he dealt with the Eastern problem, and
Right.
he brought an army in and pulled it back.
Okay.
He later had a very unhappy ending.
Right.
He went to fight the Parthians,
Yeah.
and he got defeated and captured, and the Parthian general, or king I suppose, then had him as his slave, and he'd use him as a footstool to stand on when he was mounting his horse. And after he had died, they skinned him, and they kept the skin.
Wow.
And any Romans that would come, they would show them the skin of Aurelian.
Oh dear.
Yes.
Wow.
Hard times, eh?
Yes, definitely.
Go from emperor
Yeah.
to being a slave.
It's like a different planet in a way, with people being crucified and
Oh, God.
Nero burning Christians, and
Yeah.
it's hard to
He
contemplate.
wasn't the worst.
Who was worse than Nero, Adrian? Caligula?
Diocletian, for a start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry, I don't
Sorry.
want to digress too much, okay. So, moving on a bit. So, in our first discussion together, you revealed that you no longer agree on Wilson and Blackett on their identification of Arthur I
No.
in the Welsh records. In the chapter The Glastonbury Hoax, you mentioned the story of the slaying of an Irish chieftain called Rueth in 367 AD on the slopes of Mount Snowdon by Arthur I. So, for the purposes of this recording today, can you please explain again why you have changed your position on Arthur I, and if Arthur didn't slay Rueth, who did?
Probably Magnus Maximus, but
Right, who was the alleged father of
yeah.
Arthur I, yeah.
the reason I changed my opinion about Arthur I, there's 2 reasons. First of all, I told you I had a look at the Black Book, the Arthurian 3859,
Right,
and I looked at the actual names in list 4,
yeah,
and it's not Arthur.
it says...
Alan kept telling me, no, it's Arthur, don't believe them, those idiots don't know what they're talking about. Well, I had a look for myself. It says Anton.
Anton, yeah?
Thun.
A-N-T-O-N?
Anton.
Okay.
Or Anton. Anthony, anyway.
Yeah.
So he's not Arthur, So also the second reason is that I think if you're going to start trusting genealogies, you can't pick and choose that like that. And all the genealogies of Wales will tell you that there was this Breton dynasty descended from someone called Conan. Not Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Briton, who Magnus Maximus put in charge of Brittany. Magnus Maximus moved a whole army to Gaul, and he left a lot of people there to take over Brittany, Little Britain. Right? And he put this guy in charge, and the dynasty descended from him. And then later on, you had, after the Romans had departed, you had a king called Constantine, who was deposed by Vortigern.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
and Vortigern was from the Gewissae, which is the borderlands, near the River Severn,
Yeah.
around Gloucester area and down to Bristol, that sort of area. So Vortigern deposed and killed, or he had his Scottish, not Scots, they were Picts, Praetorian Guard to get rid of this troublesome guy and let him be king. Then he had them murdered, which started the Pictish War, which caused such trouble. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But this Constantine had two brothers, young brothers, who were taken to Brittany. And they were Aurelius, right? And his brother Uther.
Right.
And they then came back with an army and defeated Vortigern and defeated the Saxons and shut up Vortigern in his castle, and he was burnt alive.
Wow.
And that was in Wales, just over the border in Wales there. I can't remember exactly where, but people know. So Arthur is supposedly the son of Uther.
Yeah.
But I think that might be also a lie.
Okay.
Because in the traditions, or I think it's even in Geoffrey of Monmouth, I can't remember now, but in the traditions that Uther went to Cornwall and laid siege to Tintagel, where the Duke of Cornwall lived, with his beautiful wife, Igerna, and he desired her. You've probably seen Excalibur, haven't you?
Yeah.
And he has Merlin cast a spell so he looks like her husband.
That's right. I remember reading this in Geoffrey Monmouth. Yeah.
And goes in and does the business.
Yeah.
And as a result, she later gives birth to Arthur. So he's Uther's son. I think the truth is that she was pregnant from the Duke of Cornwall.
Right.
And that's why Arthur was banished away, or he was supposedly taken away and hidden from Uther, wasn't he?
Yes.
And brought up as by a woman in the forest or something, and then he had to come and claim his sword.
Yeah.
To become king of Britain. So I think he was probably descended from the Duke of Cornwall, really, by blood.
Right.
Because his mother had been, taken away and married Uther.
Yeah.
Who was not a very nice bloke, from what we can tell. Anyway, that's what I think. So I think we're looking at a different Arthur, very brave Arthur, very good Arthur, but not the son of, or the sixth generation descent from Magnus Maximus, no, he would have been the son of Magnus Maximus on this.
Yes.
So, and then the other Glamorgan king, Arthur II, you've got the genealogy clear in the Harleian manuscripts, you know, tracing him back, to the earlier kings of Glamorgan, like Caractacus, and going back all the way up to Brutus. You got that there. So there's no mystery there, really. Two separate kings, and I believe there are two separate battles of Baden as well.
Oh, okay. Right.
Because we have the, in here, Alan was very definite of this place north of Maesteg, battlefield place.
Yeah.
I went with him there to see it. And, the names are there. Clearly, it was a battle fought there, and it's called Blyden Farm there, But I do believe now, and I'm going to show you something else here that will clarify this for you, if I can. See, I come well prepared. No, it's not that book. Where's it gone? Oh, here. Now, Alan believed, I believe, that Arthur II died in 570. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, if we look...
That would have been shortly after the comet, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we look in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, yes, we have the whole, history, and I could go into that. I want to do a book on Hengist and Horsa at some time.
Who, sorry?
Hengist and Horsa.
Right.
who were the first Saxons. Well, they weren't Saxons; they're Jutes.
Right.
Came to Kent.
Yes.
Now, I'm a Kentish man.
Yeah.
And I have an interest. I'm half Welsh and half English,
Okay.
so I've got a foot in both camps.
Yeah.
But they had descendants, and then you had the Wessex genealogies, and a lot of that is in here, but it's been mixed up because they don't take into account when they truly invaded the Isle of Wight, but that's another story here. But in here, we got descendants from, you had Cerdic and Cynric, his son. They did start doing the business for Wessex. Right? And descended from them, you get Colin,
yeah.
and Cuther, and they have a fight with Ethelbert, or Ethelbert, and put them to flight into Kent, killing 2 ealdormen at Wimbledon, Oslav and Cuba. So you had a fight between Wessex and Kent there. That was in 568, right? And then 571, Cuthwolf fought the Brito-Welsh at Bledcanford and took 4 villages, Limbury, Aylesbury, Besington and Eynsham. So they're into the Cotswolds then, aren't they? Eynsham, Aylesbury, that's Oxfordshire, isn't it, Aylesbury? No, is it?
You're going up from here.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly where.
Near Beaconsfield, is it?
Right,
Somewhere up that way. And he died the same year, so Cuthwell's dead. And then we have 577. So this is after Arthur II has died, in 570. Cuthwine and Colin fought the Britons and killed 3 kings, Conmail, Condidan and Farinmail, in the place called Durham. They took 3 cities, Gloucester, Cirencester and Bath. Right?
Right, okay.
Now Durham is just north of Bath.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If you ever go to Bath from the M4, you turn off, you go down that long winding road, the hill, yeah?
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That big hill behind is the mound of Bath,
okay. Right,
Mons
yeah.
Bardonis.
Wow.
So that's where that battle took place.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the importance of that battle, they took these 3 cities, Bath, Cirencester and Gloucester, yeah, and that effectively cut off the southwest peninsula from Wales. So it separated the Britons of the southwest from the Britons of Wales. There was another battle, I think, must have been up near Liverpool somewhere, or probably Chester. I think there was a battle of Chester.
Dewar, was it, or something like that? Possibly?
Yeah, Dewar is up in Northumberland.
Dewar in Cheshire.
On the Dee, River Dee.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, there was a battle there that separated the Britons of the north from the North Welsh. So you're getting England cutting off these bits and pieces, and then they can deal with them separately, and the separate battles, and eventually it just leaves Wales.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Cornwall for a long time, still speaking Welsh, sort of. So that, I think, is the second battle of Baden, but they don't call it that. They call it the Battle of Durham. But Durham is right there where we're talking about, where the hill is and the winding road. And there's Tyrone Park there. You can go, you can go there today.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is the truth about that. All of that. The first battle, perhaps it was fought by Arthur I. But this one is the second Battle of Baden, and I don't think either Arthur was actually there.
Okay, that's very interesting.
These other kings died, 3 of them. When they say they're kings, they're probably the rulers of those 3 cities.
Okay, that's something for me to look into.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know everything, but this is what I've worked out.
It's an interesting theory, yeah. Okay, where are we? So, Right, in the chapter The Coming of the King of Africa, you explain how the British were compromised by the chaos of the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the ensuing conflicts between the British and Roman emperors for control of Gaul. However, Wilson and Blackett wrote about a comet that hit Britain in the middle of the 6th century, causing great devastation. is there any evidence for this catastrophe? And if there is, why isn't it being investigated by geologists and meteoritics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's huge debate about this.
There's no mention of it in the book you just showed me, I noticed.
Which book?
The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were looking at that time period.
Yes. This is all to do with the Yellow Plague.
Yeah.
And there are mentions about the Yellow Plague or a plague.
Right.
And you certainly find them in the lives of the saints.
Okay.
About how it dragged along the valley and anyone who came in contact with it would die. And it's a story also of Maelgwn Gwynedd, who was a Pendragon after Arthur, looking through a keyhole, and the plague came through the keyhole. He was hiding in a church, and he's looking through the keyhole and caught the plague through the keyhole. It's probably mythical, but
yeah.
There is debate there, and we know from tree rings that there was a cosmic winter around that time, 7 years of no lack of growth.
Yeah.
Now, the archaeologists, I think Barry Cunliffe was one of them, in Belfast, would that be? Alan was, I don't trust him. But they would claim that it was caused by a volcanic eruption.
Oh, okay.
Perhaps in Iceland or something. Mm-hmm. We've seen what that can do.
Yes, yes.
Alternatively, a comet fall. I talked to Victor Klube about this, who was a professor at Oxford at that time. He's retired now, he lives in France, I believe. Mm-hmm. But he'd done a lot of research on near-Earth asteroids, because most of the asteroid belt is between Mars and Jupiter.
Yes, Jupiter blocks off a lot of meteorites, doesn't it?
And it's my belief that the asteroid belt is the remains of a planet that was there.
Yeah. And
I'll show you why, actually. Okay. Oh, I'm full of things here, aren't I? Hold your hand out.
Oh, wow. Cool, that's heavy.
That's an iron meteorite.
Wow, that's really heavy.
Now,
I wouldn't fancy this coming down from space and hitting me on the head. Wow. And
that, well, you wouldn't fancy any kind of meteorite hitting you on the head, really. But this is an iron meteorite. We know from Earth that iron is in the centre of planets. If these small fragments of the asteroid belt just formed from dust that was left over from the formation of the solar system and just sort of agglomerated into small chunks, they wouldn't make this.
Yeah.
That is from the centre of a planet.
Wow.
A big lump of iron like that, and there's loads of iron meteorites. It's not, So I believe that meteorite, that planet, blew up. Was it the Death Star that zapped it, or was it some natural cause? Was it hit by something? Was it more likely probably some kind of electrical thing?
Okay.
But anyway, that planet blew up. And what we see is the asteroid belt and also the comets. Now, until recently, people on television like Brian Cox would come along and tell you, well, we know what comets are. They're lumps of ice, floating around, dirty snowball.
Wasn't he a pop star, Brian Cox?
Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, he should still be. Yeah. Well, every time they sent a spacecraft to rendezvous with the planet, a comet, or an asteroid, A, they look very similar, and B, they're made of rock. They're not a dirty snowball, however you look at it. The tail that comes off it is to do with electricity, and it's to do with the difference in electricity of the outer solar system, which is more negatively charged, compared with the inner solar system. It causes like a lighting up of plasma, like a plasma tube.
Right, okay.
As the electric force is moving along with it. So all these fragments are remains, and so when they say there's not enough stuff left in the asteroid belt for it to be a planet, no, a lot of it ended up out making Oort clouds elsewhere, or else maybe it crashed into Jupiter or the Sun, or Mars is really damaged. Look at the moon,
Yes,
so there's been a lot of impacting craters around. Something happened to this solar system and it lost a planet. So that's what I think about that. And was it a comet? Well, maybe a huge chunk fell on Wales or fell near it. I don't know.
Okay.
But that certainly was Alan's opinion.
Yeah, I've heard that the comet we're talking about came in from the north of Britain, and also hit, I think it was Bolivia in South America.
Yeah.
So it caught us,
right.
but it carried on causing problems elsewhere in the world.
Well, Alan was certainly, he certainly believed in that, and that there'd been a big drop in population because it caused a famine. And we know there must have been a famine because the tree rings tell us how there were 7 consecutive bad years, and there wouldn't be much food. And then in the saints' stories and things, they tell us how the only people who survived were those who were hunting game.
Right.
Or else they fled.
Right. Okay.
To get away from the yellow plague that came with it.
Fascinating stuff. Okay. So while you have changed your opinion on Arthur 1 for the most part, you're still very much in agreement with Wilson and Blackett on Arthur 2, the son of Murig. So can you tell us what sort of a king this Arthur was, and if his story aligns with the legends and mythology of King Arthur?
I think that is very likely. I think the battle of, Arthur's supposed to have fought 12 battles, but most of those battles take place in the north of England or in Scotland.
Right.
Yeah, if you really go into it.
Right.
That Alan didn't like that, but that other people think that very, very clearly. And you have the whole thing about Reged and the poem. What's it? The poem of the Knights or whatever it is. They quote, a big defeat of the Britons that happened up north.
Right.
And so I see that as being those battles up north are being connected with the first Arthur, who I think was this guy.
Anton.
No, it's not Anton. I don't think Anton has anything to do with it. But I think this one who was connected with Uther Pendragon and Aurelius.
Aurelius, yeah.
He was probably the son of the Duke of Cornwall, in my opinion, in truth. But they pretended he was the son of Uther by this magic. Merlin had done it.
There's a guy called Guy of Warwick as well, isn't there? Who's quite an interesting character when it comes to Arthurian stuff.
Yeah, I don't know much about him, but I've heard the name. Anyway, I believe that the Arthur II probably fought the Battle of Badon, but on the Maesteg Hill, right?
Yeah.
The one that Alan talks about, and he was a good leader. But I believe that his main thing that was so great is he is the one who established the Round Table,
right?
And the whole chivalry thing, and based in Caerleon. I mean, they talk about the other Lodge Hill place near Cardiff as being Camelot. I think Camelot was Caerleon myself.
Right. Okay.
Because you've got that big amphitheatre there.
Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
Which I think is the Round Table.
Okay.
Yeah, a table just means a flat area, and all the knights could gather there, all their family. They could have a big ceremony. It's a festival on Whitsun every year.
Yeah.
Sit down and eat together. Doesn't mean it had a big wooden table for them all to sit round. They were there, and they probably had all sorts of games and a bit of dueling and I don't know, riding horses and charging each other with lances, all that probably. Meanwhile, that was the plenary court of Arthur, which meant that was when he's going to discuss business for the kingdom that year.
Right.
What we're going to do. The pesky Saxons have been creeping up there. We've got to do something about it. Because the rest of the year, they're out in their own territories, running their castles or whatever they had. Rescuing maidens and whatever, then they'll come there for the plenary court once a year. So I think that took place in Caerleon myself.
I think you could be right there. I've seen the place and it it just has that kind of ambience
Yes.
that you know there's been some
Yes.
serious history.
And also, if I were Arthur, I know Alan Baram loved that big hill fort above it.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that at time of attack, you might go up there. But I think for day-to-day living, you would prefer to be living in the Romano-British town where you've got baths, you know,
sure.
probably restaurants, there's, you know, probably all the things that go with soldiers enjoy, I won't say anymore, in the town, you know.
Table tennis, yeah.
Yeah, a bit of table tennis, who knows what.
Brilliant. Okay. Right. Okay, we're coming close to the end now. In the final chapter called The Dynasty of the Holy Grail, you state that the King's List of Owain is an important document in understanding the Joseph of Arimathea connection to Britain. Can you elaborate on this, and can you tell us about the wife of Beli the Great, who would seem to be the key character in all of this?
Yeah, so you have to be clear about who you're calling Beli the Great, right? There's a Beli the Great from the London area who was the father, I think, of Lud.
That's the guy that I thought I was talking about.
No, that's
Right.
much earlier.
Okay.
The Beli we're talking about is the brother of Guiderius, or Ruaid, at the time of Claudius. So
right, so we're going 50 to 100 years further ahead, yeah.
So this Beli, who's mentioned in some of the in the Triads particularly, after the Romans defeated the Britons in Essex, your part of the world, probably at Colchester, I think, and then they built a temple there and big statue of Claudius, and they made that.
It made him a god, didn't they?
Yeah, because you know he's the guy. You know he's beaten the Britain. He did better than Julius Caesar did, only because he brought elephants with him. The poor Britons, they never had chariots, you know, with their ponies. Ponies see these elephants, they will start rearing up, and people throwing off their chariots and trampled on. Anyway, Beli, in the Triads, it tells us about retinues, famous retinues, and there was a retinue of Beli from the London area, who came with his retinue and put himself under the command of Caractacus to carry on the fight.
Yeah.
So this is the Beli, I think, who married Anna, because it's around that time, you see.
Yeah, the time's
so
right.
He carried on the fight. And he's Arvi Regus, I believe, because Arvus means ploughed land or lowland. Regus, king of the ploughed land or lowland. England is the lowland.
Yes.
Yeah, he's come from the lowlands.
Yeah.
You know, compared with Wales. So he's the king from there. He's come over to Caractacus, probably when Caractacus was taken back to Rome, he probably carried on some kind of guerrilla thing. But I also think that he is connected with the palace at Chichester. Is it Fishbourne? Is that the one?
You could be right, yeah.
I'm not sure if it's Fishbourne is near here actually. But anyway, there's a huge palace there. It's the biggest palace, or the biggest Roman building complex north of Italy, you know. It was a gift to him. And one of the guys who's named on it, there's a tablet in the centre of Chichester that commemorates the building of a temple there. Yeah, you can't read it because it's outside the village, the town hall. They put it in a glass case, but they let the glass get so dirty you can't read this thing behind it. It's really annoying, but you can get a leaflet about it, and it tells us that this temple was built by Pudens, and Pudens.
Rufus Pudens.
Yes. He came over with Aulus. You know, he was with the Romans at that time, and that's where he would have met his British wife.
Right. Yeah.
Daughter of Caractacus, because they were taken.
Claudia. Gladys. Yeah.
Yeah, Gladys Claudia.
Yeah.
And they established the church, or their house became a church. It's now the church of Saint Praxedes.
Yes.
No, Potenziana, sorry, it's the Church of St. Potenziana out the Esquiline Hill.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there.
Have you?
Yes.
Right, yeah. What was that like?
Fantastic.
I bet.
And the other place, St. Praxedes or Praxide, just round the corner, near this horrible great basilica they built later. But this really charming church, full of mosaics. And underneath it, there's a catacomb under it. These girls used to bury the martyrs.
Really?
Yes,
Right, okay.
that's the history.
Because all of their children were martyred, weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were too.
Yeah, and they were too, yeah.
So their tombs are in there.
Yeah, Timothy and...
Yes. And all these people, and there's 13 popes buried there.
Wow. Okay.
And that was the Church of Potenziana, where they lived, was the original Cathedral of Rome.
Yeah.
But Constantine changed it. What is now the Church of St. John Lateran, which is the Cathedral for Rome now, not St. Peter's, by the way.
Yes, the Vatican, yeah.
It's not the Vatican, it's St. John's Lateran.
Mm-hmm.
They took a table from this old church and they turned into a church, St. John's Lateran, what had been an army barracks. So knocked that down, built a church there. And that became the Cathedral of Rome.
Wow.
But this is much earlier. And the atmosphere in these little churches, from the foundations of Christianity, you can see. And when I went into Praxedes, which was the Palatium Britannicum, was there, they'd obviously been doing some excavating in there.
Wow.
And they'd stuck things up. There's a little area just near the door where they'd stuck bits and pieces they dug up.
Yeah.
And among these was a green man head.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's not Roman.
No, it's not Christian either.
Not Christian.
Yeah.
But,
That's interesting, yeah.
it's still being continued, because the green man with the oak leaves coming out of his mouth represents God in the Celtic tradition.
Fascinating. What do you think about Linus? Linus was, most people say, was the brother of Claudia. And he was the first or second bishop of Rome.
Yes.
Depending on whether you believe that Peter was.
Even academic historians agree with that.
Well, the Linus was the first bishop of Rome.
Yes.
Okay.
Because there were two churches.
Yeah.
There was a Jewish church and there was a Gentile church.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's where Linus comes in.
Oh, okay.
Clemens and so on.
But I mean, officially speaking, if you Wikipedia Linus, they'll tell you he's Italian, or he was Italian.
Yeah. Well,
but he was Claudia's
he was
brother.
descended from Pudens.
Yeah.
So Pudens was Roman. So
well, I think some people say that Linus was actually the brother of Claudia rather than the son. So if he was the brother, then he could be. Anyway,
I don't know that much, but I've been there, and if you ever go to Rome,
I've been to Rome, but I don't think I went there. I went
it's
to Rome
off
when
the
I was
beaten track. It's a bit hard to get.
I don't think
They've only got 2 metro lines. You get out there's a particular stop, and then you have to walk up the hill to get there.
Yeah.
But it's
well
worth doing.
worth it,
It's worth doing.
If I go back, that's
Yeah.
definitely something I'll do. Okay. Now, in the same chapter, which was the Dynasty of the Holy Grail, the final chapter in the book, you identified Joseph of Arimathea as the stepfather of Jesus. Are you still of that opinion, and can you give us your reasons for this identification? Recently, I've obviously read your book. I've spoken to Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, who says that he was the grandfather of Jesus. The most popular opinion, it would seem, is that he was the uncle of Jesus. And Edmund Marriage, I think, said he was James the Just, the brother of Jesus. So we get all these different answers.
Again, I've changed my opinion on this.
Oh, you have? Really?
Yes.
Right, okay.
I think you have to go with what we're told in the text.
Yeah.
And they tell us he was the uncle.
Yeah.
Either the uncle of the Virgin Mary or the uncle of Jesus. I tend to think maybe he was the uncle of the Virgin Mary. And that way, his granddaughter would have been first cousin once removed of Mary. And it says in the text, in the genealogies, that Anna was the cousin of the Virgin Mary. Uh, I was arguing in the Holy Kingdom that Mary probably married again.
Yes, Alpheus.
Alpheus. I was
Yeah.
saying that we got all these different Marys, and we can start to narrow them down. Mary, the daughter of Alpheus, same as Mary, the sister of Jesus, and all this. I now don't think Alpheus was Joseph of Arimathea.
Okay.
Now I leave it open that maybe the Virgin Mary wasn't a virgin and got married after Jesus was born. I don't see why. I'm being struck with a cough now. I don't see that she has to have been a virgin for the rest of her life.
No. Yeah.
Maybe she was.
Mm.
Maybe she was. And I don't want to be disrespectful to her that way. But at the same time, Jesus could have had brothers and sisters by the normal, natural way.
Yes.
After the angel had done his stuff and whatever they did.
Yeah.
So I'm open to that. But I don't think he was the same as Joseph of Arimathea, because it doesn't say that in the text. It's never been taught that. It's always said that he's Jesus' uncle. He might have been great uncle. And I go with that.
And he was he was supposed to be a tin merchant or a mineral merchant, but in a document I read by Wilson and Blackett, they said that they disagreed with that they don't think he was, but they didn't give any reasons why, which was really frustrating.
They could be like that. But, what we do know is that Cornwall was where people dug not just tin, but also copper.
Copper, yeah.
And there was lead from the Mendips, and there was copper in North Wales. And Alan and Baram told me that they used to mine lead in Wales as well. And they were said, for every 100 tons of lead, you get 3 tons of silver. Yeah, that's what Alan said to me. So maybe they had means of separating the silver from the lead. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to me that he went to Cornwall, where there's a little island where St. Michael's Mount is.
Yes,
and that used to be called the Island of Fish. So the rich Fisher King would have been the guy who owned that island.
Wow.
And that would be where, probably once a year...
That's very interesting.
Once a year, the people have been digging... they have these things called fugus in Cornwall, these underground chambers. Nobody knows what they're for.
No, I think I've heard of
they're
those.
stone-lined chambers, and there's a number of them. They're always not very far away from where they would have been mining their tin. And I think they would have stored the tin in the fugu, as they're making it, as a protected safe, really. The safe as it could be, probably guarded with stones, the entrance and so on. And then when the ships came from the Mediterranean, and they come up to the island, we're told this in the Greek text, how the traders would come there and buy the tin and trade for other things. So you can imagine they would take their tin out, and they go with either carts or they go with boats to the island, and then they'd do their buying and selling and buying stuff and trading.
Yeah.
And that would be the island. And just across the water, from St. Michael's Mount, you got Mara-Zion. Mara, Sea of Zion. Zion, So that would be a Jewish enclave.
That's another island, is it?
No, it's on the coast there.
It's just on the coastline,
yes, right opposite. So Mara-Zion would have been a Jewish settlement.
Well, a big coincidence.
Yes, it's all there, if we look.
Wow.
So that's where Joseph would have gone normally.
Yeah.
But he could also have gone round and sailed up the Severn and gone to Glamorgan. It's not difficult.
Wow. Amazing to contemplate all that. Okay, Adrian.
You getting tired?
No, not really. No, we're all right.
I'm just starting.
I'm on my last question. And the last question is, At the beginning of the book, you write very warmly about the time you spent with Alan Wilson and Baram Blackett in South Wales. What's your favourite memory, the highlight of that experience for you, do you think? Can you remember, or have you got an anecdote you can share with us?
So many. Probably going up Monadhydgaya for the first time and seeing the church there.
Right, and that's where you think Joseph of Arimathea is buried?
No.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's where King Arthur's buried.
King Arthur is buried, right, okay.
And
Arthur too?
Arthur too,
Yeah.
but I think also Arthur 1.
Right.
I think they're both buried there.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is I've gone back from a lot of what Alan believed Arthur II died in America.
Yes.
Now I thought at the time, that's a step too far and I'm not going there. So I left that out and just said he's died abroad.
Well, I suppose Vikings possibly went there, Romans possibly went there at one point.
Yeah. Well,
it's not impossible,
that's someone else's debate.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't believe it.
Right.
But, Alan certainly did. But what I do now believe is that the tradition linking Arthur I with Cornwall is real, and that there was a battle of Camerlan was in Cornwall. Now, Alan disagreed with that. He believed it was out near Milford Haven, West Wales.
Yeah.
But there is a big stone from that period actually in the River Camel.
Okay. Yeah.
And that river leads down to the coast, not very far from Tynchagel. So I can imagine that someone could take the body of Arthur on a barge down to the coast, then sail up the River Severn, and then go up the Ogmore River and the Iwenny, and all the way up to Monadhydgaya, take him up there. And I believe that the St. Peter, that church is called the Church of St. Peter.
Yes, that's the one that Wilson and Blackett had excavated, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is very close to Clan Ilid.
Right. Okay.
Where Joseph of Arimathea lived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And at Clan Ilid, you've got this big, giant circle. And I was so struck. Yeah, probably this was the highlight for me. First time I scrambled up into that circle, and it was May, and the bluebells were in flower.
Lovely.
And it's just sort of wooded.
Yeah, lovely.
The atmosphere was something else. And I now believe that is the real core Urgine, founded by Joseph of Arimathea for Urgine, the daughter of King Caractacus, and that people would gather there and they would sing. That's why I call it a choir. Inside the core.
Yes.
A lot of early Christianity was to do with singing. And it had to be open and outside, so the sun could see what you're doing.
Yes.
I have God.
Yeah.
I don't believe it was Clan Iltid, Clan Whit Major. I've moved away from that.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a confusion of Iltid and Ilid, the two names.
And they're about 300 years apart, aren't they? I think, or something like that.
And I think people have thought that Iltid just refounded the core of Urgine. I don't believe that. There's nothing there to show. It's a very rugged area if you ever go to Clanfit Major.
I'm hoping to, yeah.
Yeah. There's no sign of any earth circle or anything there, but there is at Clan Ilid.
Is that the place where you have to walk down to it?
Yes.
It's quite low down.
Yeah, you walk down. It's a very long church, been extended. Great place.
And
not
it's the place with the three heads on the wall, the pagan gods.
I think that was in... No, you're thinking of Llandaff Cathedral.
Probably.
Yeah, that's where the three heads, and that is down.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was going to say, before we close, that the Welsh for Peter is Pedr, but when they conjoin that with the word for church, clan, the P becomes a B. It becomes Clan Bedr.
Yes, I remember you mentioning this before. Yeah,
now I believe that they spell things all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
So it can be Pedr or it can be Pedrir. Yeah, and then it becomes Clan Bedrir. Yeah.
This reminds me
of Bedivere.
Yeah, go on.
And I was going to say that if you go into the Mort d'Arthur, you read that, and after Arthur dies, Bedwyr, or Bedivere, we call him in English, is the one who takes his body and buries it, and he becomes a hermit, and he lives there for the rest of his life. Alan claims to have found a hermitage there, where the church is. Yeah, an earlier hermit, a round, beehive-shaped hermitage. Yeah, and that's where they found this votive cross. Yeah. Now, annoyingly, he didn't tell me about that when we were writing this book. That's why there's no mention of it. Yeah. He was keeping that secret. He didn't trust me or something. I don't know. Thought I was going to nick it. Or...
I don't think he trusted anyone, did he?
No, not at all. Now that's apparently it's in America. Oh. Along with the King Arthur State is a mess. Well, I have great respect for them for the way they opened up this field.
Absolutely.
Which was closed for that. Nobody was talking about this in Welsh records.
They've done an awful lot, haven't they? Yeah.
Tremendous amount. I don't agree with everything they did, but it's very, very unfortunate that they were not treated with more respect by academia, that their books were not adopted. Our poor book, I spent ages, right? You can imagine the work that went into this. It was out of print in 18 months.
And yet somebody bought up a lot of copies, didn't they?
Well, Wilson and Baram did.
Right, okay.
But it makes you think, and it's very sad. It's a very, very tragic, sad story, actually.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the more I learn about it, the more I see that.
The story of Alan Wilson and Baram, and I do believe. Now, I'm into all sorts of other stuff, as you know, and I'm a bit kind of clairvoyant myself. I do believe that the excavation on the church brought them a lot of bad luck.
Right. Okay.
If anyone out there is a publisher, serious publisher, I don't mean just putting it up on Amazon or something. I mean a serious publisher that can get them into shops. I'll be open to getting this republished.
I was going to ask you about that. We need it to be published.
I'm the only one left, And Alan's nephew says he doesn't want anything to do with Alan's work. And Baram, his brother's already dead and his mother's dead. I don't think he has any other relatives. So I'm the only one left.
Okay.
So if anyone out there is a publisher, let me know.
Okay. Shall we end it there?
May as well.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Adrian. It's been fantastic. Cheers.
We'll have a bite to eat.
Yes, lovely. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Oh, that was very good.